The heavy red velvet curtains absorb the sound, or maybe it's just the thick, suffocating silence that falls over the room. The air smells of roasting turkey, pine needles, and something metallic and sharp, the scent of impending conflict, maybe, or just the cheap tinsel decorating the mantelpiece. My fork clatters against the porcelain plate, a tiny, insignificant sound in the sudden vacuum left by his words. Everyone at the long, polished mahogany table is frozen. Aunts, uncles, cousins I haven't seen in a year, my parents at either end looking like they've just swallowed stones. Their eyes flick from him to me, then back to him, searching for a cue, for something to break this. But there's nothing. Just the echo of his voice hanging in the tense, overly warm room. He sits there, my brother, across the table. His tie is slightly askew, loosened collar of a shirt he probably hasn't worn since last Christmas. There's a smirk playing on his lips, a cruel twist I know all too well. He had been talking about his new promotion, his bonus, his plans for the next year, all delivered with that usual swagger, that careful performance of effortless success he's perfected since we were kids. And then, like a well-aimed dart, he turned to me. The words land like a physical blow, cold and precise. Well, some of us actually make things happen, you know? Aren't just existing. He pauses, letting the implications sink in. My heart is pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. I stare at him, my breath caught in my throat. He leans back, confident, enjoying the spotlight he's manufactured. Honestly, he says louder now, making sure everyone hears, you're useless. Just like always. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, it helps me more than you know. Useless, the word hangs there, heavy and thick, suffocating the festive cheer, poisoning the air. It's not just a word, it's a culmination of years. Years of quiet effort, of unseen work, of accomplishments shrugged off or compared unfavorably. Years of being the shadow, the one who didn't fit the mold of loud, obvious success that he embodied. He built his life on being the golden child, the one who demanded attention and got it. And I was the backdrop, the stable, quiet one. The one who apparently, in his eyes, contributed nothing of value. Growing up, it was always this way. He was the storm, the center of attention, the one with the booming laugh and the easy charm that masked a core of relentless insecurity he projected onto others. I was the quiet weather system far off, barely registering on anyone's radar unless I was in his path. Report cards, sports, even just telling stories, he knew how to make himself the hero, or at least the most interesting character. My achievements, hard-won as they were, felt small and muted next to his orchestrated spectacle. He'd ask what I was working on, listen for a moment, then somehow twist it back to himself, to his own, grander endeavors. It wasn't just a lack of interest, it was a deliberate act of diminishing, a constant, subtle chipping away. He'd built a career in a field that thrived on visibility, on loud pronouncements, and aggressive networking. I, on the other hand, found my place in the quiet mechanics of things. In intricate systems, in understanding complex data, in building the infrastructure that others took for granted. My work wasn't flashy. It didn't involve standing on stages or making grand pronouncements at board meetings that hit the evening news. It was done behind closed doors, in late nights fueled by bad coffee, in meticulous planning and execution that required a kind of patience and focus he simply didn't possess and therefore didn't value. He called it boring, he called it counting beans, he called me someone who just pushed paper around. The lead-up to this Christmas dinner had been particularly brutal. Months of it. My job had become all-consuming. It wasn't just a job anymore, it was a crucible. I was working on something massive, a project that demanded everything. 18-hour days were normal.
Weekends ceased to exist.
There were nights I slept on the office couch, eating cold pizza, staring at spreadsheets that seemed to swim before my eyes. I had to keep it quiet. It was a sensitive project, the kind that could shift the entire landscape of the company. Confidentiality agreements were ironclad. I couldn't even tell my parents, who worried about my perpetual exhaustion. My brother, of course, noticed the absence. He saw the dark circles under my eyes, the way I sometimes zoned out mid-conversation, pulled back into the intricate world I was building. And he interpreted it, as he always did, through the lens of my perceived inadequacy. He'd call and leave voicemails dripping with mock concern. Still plugging away at whatever it is you do. Must be tough, staying busy with all that, pushing paper, or even worse, the casual cruelty. Heard about mutual acquaintance getting promoted. Seems like everyone's moving up these days, huh? Guess it takes all kinds, each word a tiny needle prick, confirming his unwavering belief in my mediocrity. He didn't know he couldn't know what I was actually doing. And that ignorance fueled his confidence in tearing me down. He saw my exhaustion not as a sign of intense effort, but as proof of inefficiency. He saw my silence about my work not as discretion, but as having nothing worth talking about. He thrived on external validation. His life was a performance calibrated for applause. He needed everyone to see him, to acknowledge his success, to marvel at his perceived brilliance. My quiet competence, my lack of need to constantly trumpet my achievements, was anathema to him. It didn't fit his narrative, and worse, it subtly challenged the very foundation of his own carefully constructed identity. If I could find success and meaning without his kind of showmanship, what did that say about him? Better to just dismiss it. Better to label me, definitively, as useless. The months leading up to Christmas were a blur of work and this simmering tension with him. Every family call was a minefield. Every interaction left me feeling smaller, depleted. There was one particularly bad call with my mother where she, bless her heart, tried to mediate. "He just worries about you," she'd said, her voice tired. "He sees how hard you work, but you don't seem to get anywhere, not like him." It was a dagger twist. Even my mother, who loved me fiercely, measured my worth against his yardstick. It wasn't her fault. He'd trained them well over the years, subtly, relentlessly, to see the world through the lens of his competitive narrative. He wasn't just competing with me, he was shaping the family's perception of both of us. I tried, sometimes, to explain the complexity of my work, the long-term vision, the potential impact. But his eyes would glaze over. He'd interrupt, change the subject, or simply nod dismissively before launching into another story about his latest deal, his latest triumph. It became clear that he didn't want to understand. Understanding would mean acknowledging the value in what I did, and that would mean dismantling the comfortable hierarchy he'd established. It was easier, better for him, if I remained the useless one. There was a moment, maybe 6 weeks before Christmas, that became a turning point, though I didn't recognize it fully then. I was working late, staring at code and data streams that danced across the screen, the weight of the project pressing down on me. I got a text from him, completely unrelated to work, just a casual boast about some minor achievement. And something snapped. It wasn't just about the text, it was about the relentless, unspoken competition, the constant need to put me down. I realized then that his behavior wasn't going to change. He wasn't going to suddenly see the value in me, not unless it was something undeniable, something on his terms. He had built his perception of me, and he was committed to maintaining it. And I was exhausted from trying to prove him wrong in ways he refused to see. It was then that I made a conscious decision. Not to fight him on his terms, but to keep building, in the dark, in the quiet. My success, if it came, would have to be so big, so undeniable, that it would shatter his perception, not just for him, but for everyone who had heard his narrative over the years. It became a silent, desperate motivation fueling the long nights. This project, this insane, demanding, all-consuming project, it wasn't just about my career anymore. It was about reclaiming my identity from the box he'd put me in. The negotiations for the CEO position had been grueling. Weeks of back and forth, endless meetings, presenting strategies, justifying budgets, convincing a skeptical board that I was the right person to lead the company into its next phase. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Every time I felt a flicker of doubt, I'd hear his voice in my head, calling me useless, saying I pushed paper, that I didn't do anything real. And that voice, ironically, became the fuel. I would show him. I would show them all. The final decision had come through just days before Christmas. A hushed phone call, the CEO himself on the line, his voice grave, then breaking into a genuine smile as he delivered the news. I remember standing in my empty apartment, the city lights twinkling outside, tears streaming down my face. Relief, exhaustion, disbelief, and a fierce, quiet triumph warring inside me. It was real. The title, the responsibility, the culmination of years of quiet work. It was all happening. The official announcement was scheduled for late Christmas Day, a strategic move to hit the quiet news cycle. My lawyer had advised me to keep it completely confidential until then. Not a word to anyone. Not even my family. Especially not my brother. The thought of telling him, of seeing his reaction, was complicated. Part of me wanted to rub his face in it immediately. Another part, the part that was just bone-tired, wanted to savor it in private for a moment. And a small, dark part of me, the part that remembered every slight, every dismissive comment, wondered how I could use this. Christmas dinner. The annual performance. The same cast, the same script. The forced cheer, the awkward small talk, and inevitably his moment in the sun. I had walked in knowing the announcement was hours away. I carried the weight of the secret, the knowledge that my life was about to fundamentally change, and no one in this room had a clue. I dressed carefully, trying to project calm confidence, not wanting to give him any ammunition, but also not wanting to appear small or defeated. I just wanted to get through the meal, smile, nod, make polite conversation, and then retreat to my own space to brace for the public storm that was coming. But he couldn't help himself. He had to deliver the blow. He had to put me back in my box. He had to make sure everyone knew his place was above mine. And sitting there, listening to him drone on about his latest, slightly inflated achievement, I felt the familiar pressure build. The urge to defend myself, to finally tell him off, to scream that he had no idea. But then I remembered the secret, the weight of the coming announcement, and a different kind of cold settled over me, replacing the familiar heat of humiliation. When he delivered the line, "You're useless." Just like always, it hit differently this time. It wasn't just painful, it was absurd. He was standing on a soapbox made of sand, completely unaware of the tidal wave about to hit him. The silence that followed his words stretched, becoming unbearable. I saw my mother wince. My father looked down at his plate. The cousins shifted uncomfortably. No one defended me. Of course not. They were used to this dynamic. They had accepted his narrative. Why challenge it now? In that silence, I had a choice. I could respond, engage, get pulled into the same old argument that went nowhere. I could express my hurt, my anger, try to explain, again, that he was wrong. Or I could let the moment hang, let his words sit in the air, poisonous and sharp, and wait. Wait for the real answer to arrive. The TV was on in the background, muted. It was usually ignored during dinner, just a flicker of light in the periphery. News channels, holiday specials, whatever was on. My uncle, perched closest to it, reached for the remote, presumably to turn it off or switch to something less serious. But just as his fingers closed around it, the screen changed. A breaking news graphic flashed. The network's lead anchor appeared, looking serious. And the logo behind her. It was my company's logo. My heart stopped. This was it. The announcement. Now. Here. At Christmas dinner. I felt a strange detachment. It was like watching a scene unfold that I was also somehow a part of. My brother was still sitting back, chest puffed out, enjoying the lingering impact of his insult. He hadn't even looked at the TV. My parents were still avoiding my eyes, uncomfortable. The cousins were still frozen. The anchor's voice, clear and professional, filled the sudden void left by the silence. She was talking about a major leadership change. She used terms like strategic shift, future direction, new era. The camera cut to a graphic, a photo beside a name. My photo, my name, and the title beneath it. Taking the helm as the new chief executive officer is, she paused, looking directly into the camera. My name? The words hung in the air alongside the fading echo of my brother's insult. Useless. Just like always and now. New chief executive officer. The contrast was stark, brutal, undeniable. The room fell silent in a way that was entirely different from the silence moments before. This was the silence of shock, of disbelief, of a reality shattering before their eyes. I watched their faces. My mother gasped a small, choked sound. My father's head snapped up, his eyes wide, searching my face. The cousins stared at the screen, then at me, back and forth, mouths slightly open. And my brother. His smirk vanished. His face, moments before so confident, went utterly blank. The color drained from it, leaving it a pasty, unhealthy white. His eyes were fixed on the screen on my photo on the title. He looked like he'd been struck by lightning, like the floor had just dropped out from under him. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He tried to glance at me, but his gaze seemed stuck, trapped by the image of my face on the screen, the words labeling me not useless, but the CEO. The anchor continued talking, detailing my background, my contributions to the company, the board's confidence in my leadership. My quiet work, the pushing paper, the counting beans, was being articulated in terms of strategic vision, operational excellence, a deep understanding of the industry. The narrative he had so carefully constructed, the one he had just reinforced with such venom, was being dismantled live on national television. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The TV was saying it all for me. I just sat there, holding their gazes one by one. My mother's disbelief melting into pride, tears welling in her eyes. My father's stunned silence giving way to a slow, proud nod. The cousins' confusion turning to awe, maybe even a touch of envy. And my brother's face, a masterpiece of abject shock and dawning horror. He looked utterly, completely blindsided. He had come expecting to deliver a final, public humiliation. He had walked into a room where the person he called useless was about to be revealed as the head of a major corporation. The anchor finished her report, and the screen cut to something else, but the image lingered in their minds. The silence returned, but it was different now. It pulsed with unasked questions, with unspoken apologies, with a profound reordering of everything they thought they knew. My brother finally found his voice, a weak, hoarse whisper. What is this? I looked at him, my gaze steady. The cold satisfaction was immense, a deep, powerful current running through me. Years of dismissal, of being underestimated, of biting my tongue, all culminating in this single, perfect moment. I felt calm, empowered, and utterly, completely vindicated. That, I said, my voice quiet but clear, cutting through the stunned silence, is what happens when you're not useless. He flinched as if I'd struck him. The carefully constructed mask of his superiority had shattered, revealing the raw insecurity beneath. He stammered, tried to bluster something about how I never told anyone, how could I, he didn't know. The excuses were pathetic, grasping at straws in the face of the undeniable truth. He hadn't just been wrong, he had been spectacularly, publicly, humiliatingly wrong. And he had orchestrated the moment of his own undoing with his own cruel words. He had pointed the gun of his insult, not realizing I was wearing armor forged in years of quiet struggle, and that I held the trigger to a cannon that would flatten his world. The dinner table erupted in a flurry of questions, of congratulations, of people tripping over themselves to express their shock and delight. My parents were beaming, suddenly remembering every small success I'd had, every long night, reframing it all through the lens of this monumental achievement. The cousins who had barely made eye contact before were now leaning forward, asking questions, their faces full of newfound respect. My brother sat there, silent again, his face a mask of defeat. He tried to join in, to offer a strained congratulations, but the words caught in his throat. He was no longer the center of attention. He was an afterthought, his petty cruelty exposed and rendered irrelevant by the sheer scale of what he had dismissed. He had called me useless while I was quietly building an empire. I stayed for a little while longer, navigating the sudden shift in dynamics, the awkward attempts by some to gloss over what had just happened. But the air felt different. Lighter for me, suffocating for him. I felt the need to breathe, to process this moment not in the charged atmosphere of the dining room, but on my own terms. I stood up, the conversation dying down as people turned to look at me. I thanked everyone for dinner, offered my parents a genuine, heartfelt hug. Seeing the pride in their eyes was a victory in itself, separate from the moment with my brother. I looked at him one last time. He wouldn't meet my gaze. The smirk was gone, replaced by a hollow, haunted look. The confident swagger of minutes ago was a distant memory. Walking out into the cold night air, the silence in the car wasn't heavy with despair or hurt, but with a quiet sense of closure. The years of struggling in the shadows, of being told I wasn't enough, of watching him take center stage, they hadn't broken me. They had built something stronger. The battle wasn't just won. The entire landscape had changed. He could never call me useless again. Not without the echo of that television announcement, the collective gasp of the family, and the undeniable truth of my title ringing in everyone's ears. It wasn't about revenge, not purely. It was about validation. About the quiet, relentless work finally being seen, not through the distorted lens of his insecurity, but for what it truly was. It was about proving, to myself as much as to anyone else, that my path, the one he couldn't understand and therefore dismissed, had led me exactly where I was meant to be. The road ahead was daunting, filled with new challenges and immense responsibility. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just walking it, I was leading the way. And I didn't need anyone else's permission, or validation, or even understanding to know my own worth. But seeing the look on his face, that was a cold, sweet bonus. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.